Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to make a start. Welcome to the meeting of the Georges River Local Planning Panel this afternoon. We are the panel who have been appointed by the Council to determine certain development applications that have been identified by the Minister for Planning, including the development applications that are on the agenda today that you should have a copy of available outside if you don't have one. My name's Adam Seaton. I'm the chair of the panel, and I have three other members with me today. On my right, I have John Brockhoff. On my left, Helen Deegan, and my far left is our community representative, George Vardis. Just wait a moment whilst we reorganise the furniture. Need to advise you that under the provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, this meeting of the panel is being recorded, and it's also being webcast. There's a camera up there. It's being webcast live on Council's website. The recording will be made available on Council's website after today when the meeting's completed. And when you're speaking at the meeting, if you are speaking this afternoon, members of the public should ensure that their speech is respectful and appropriate. The person who uses defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be exposed to liability. The Council and the panel will take no responsibility. Any part of the meeting of the panel that goes into closed session, they will not be recorded. There's 4 applications that we've received assessment reports for today, and the panel has undertaken an inspection of the sites to which those assessment reports relate and the nearby locality. Some of you may have today where we inspected the sites and some of by, and we're going to deal with the applications in the order that they're on the list, on the agenda. So the first one will be the application relating to 87A Jubilee Avenue, Beverley Park, for the fence around the golf course. The second application we're dealing with is Avenue, Beverley Park, for the maintenance and staff amenities building. The third application will be third report and determination that we will for the dual occupancy of 2 Dardanelle Street, Mortdale, and the fourth application is as required by the Planning Panel's Code of Conduct, members are required to disclose any conflicts of interest in respect of any matter on the agenda for the panel meeting. The relevant forms have been completed by each of the panel members that are prescribed by the New South Wales Department of Planning, and they've been tabled, and they will be also provided website and included in the online minutes of the meeting, and there's no panel member who's disclosed any conflict of interest. I should inform you of the meeting process. As we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those people who've registered to speak with the Council prior to this meeting will be permitted to address the panel. Each person will be provided with 3 minutes to address the panel, but if you need an extra, it's a little longer time because you haven't been quite able to make your points and are relevant, we'll try and accommodate that. What we do is we hear from objectors first, and we'll hear from all of the objectors in respect of a particular item, and then we hear from the applicant's representative. And if you are speaking, we ask that you come forward to the table here, speak clearly into the microphone so that you're once we've heard from the speaker and the applicant's representative, we then adjourn the meeting after we've dealt with all of the matters, and we will then deliberate on those matters and make a decision available on the Council's website tomorrow. The date on the website will be the minutes of this. Made aware as the panel of some typographical errors in the report relating to the fence. talk about that if they come forward, but now going to move on to the first item on the agenda, and that, as I indicated, is the golf course at 87A Jubilee Avenue, Beverley Park, for the erection of a new perimeter. That matter, I have 6 people. I'll tell you who's registered to speak as a Borg is first, then Rob Jones, Gregory Welsh, Patrick Nash, and Gabriel Clara. So if I could start with Elise Borg. Name and address, and then
I live at 36 Fatty Avenue in Beverley Park. Mr. Chairman and panel members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk on behalf of the Beverley Park community who are here today in numbers on 1 week's notice during business hours and school holidays, and who are vehemently opposed to the construction of a perimeter fence around the centrepiece of our suburb, the Beverley Park Golf Course. Firstly, I would like to start by pointing out that the report before you is inaccurate, as you've mentioned, in relation to the number of submissions of objection received by council. I have been advised that this is due to a typographical error. The report could give the indication that the local community is divided on the issue, which could not be further from the truth. I understand panel members have now been given a memo and a verbal update on this issue, that there are now over 222 unique submissions of objection. Secondly, the applicant submitted to council an updated security and risk assessment in May 2018, which the public only cited for the first time 6 days ago. The independent assessor references this security and risk assessment in the report many times as justification for the applicant's need for the fence. I want to make a point. There can be absolutely no credibility or objectivity given to this report. The author of the report is a current director on the board of the Beverley Park Golf Course and has a long-standing relationship with the club. And this conflict of interest is not declared anywhere in the assessor's report. In relation to trees, it is clear that the 40 casuarina trees with intertwining canopies that are all 20 metres high in Ferry Avenue and another 40 in Batty Avenue that are earmarked for removal, each displaying a large blue cross on the trunk, and I assume you saw that today, were in fact strategically planted to create a barrier to help prevent rogue golf balls from leaving the course. The removal of these trees will not only have a severely detrimental impact on the streetscape of both streets, it will most definitely result in an increased number of rogue golf balls being hit out of bounds, causing an increase in damage to property and a likely increase to personal injury or death for people living or walking in those streets. Secondly, under the Green Web scheme for Sydney, Beverley Park has been identified by council as a habitat reinforcement area, which requires planting of native trees and vegetation to establish a green web link to provide for migration and habitat. The removal of so many mature trees from the golf course area is a backward step in fostering migratory and native habitat in the area. Lastly, in relation to trees, the independent planner rightly points out that an invalid reason to remove a tree is to erect a fence, and this applicant wants to remove over 100 trees to build a fence. In conclusion, it is clear upon reading the report prepared by the independent planner that this development application should never have been accepted over the counter at council. The community who are present here have had to fight every step of the way on this development application for 21 months. The applicant has well and truly used up their quota of time extensions granted by council to provide the required information to assess this DA. And after 21 months, it is evident they have absolutely no intention of providing it. And I call on you to support the assessment of the independent planner and refuse this development application outright. Thank you.
Thank you. Have Mr. Jones, please. Jones, if you name and address and your concerns, please.
My name is Rob Jones from 42 Batty Avenue, Beverley Park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents against the proposed fence around Beverley Park Golf Course. I support the report recommending refusal. However, there are a number of matters in the report which I would like to comment on. On page 13, under the heading Background, there is no mention of the fact that over the last 2 decades, the golf club has had 2 applications for a high fence around the perimeter of the golf course refused by council. The report also talks about heritage conservation and that the National Trust no longer identifies the site and or surrounding area as being a heritage conservation area. This is incorrect. The National Trust still recognises the area as a conservation area. We have received recently the following email from Mr. Graham Quint, Director of Conservation of the National Trust of Australia, who states that Cogra Urban Conservation Area, Precinct 5 Beverley Park, and Cogra Urban Conservation Area, Precinct 6 Beverley Park South, which were 2 urban conservation areas listed on the National Trust Register in November 1998, are still listed today on the National Trust Register, and the National Trust maintains a strong interest in the conservation of the heritage values of these 2 areas. This is why Cogra Council, in the 2006 Plan of Management for the golf course, required the club to provide heritage guidelines for any future development such as this fence. This has not happened. The lease states that no significant work is to be undertaken on the site unless it is shown on the master plan. There is no reference to a 2.4 kilometre perimeter fence on that plan. The report states that the proposed fence is not considered a major development, with no substantiation explaining why. Common sense tells me that a 2.5 kilometre fence, 2.1 metres high and costing $435,000 is in fact significant work. This fence is contrary to the lease agreement between council and the club. My last and most important comment is regarding the zoning and permissibility of the structure. It is acknowledged that the golf course site is located within a RE1 public recreation zone under Cogra LEP 2012. However, this development application is to erect a fence in large parts situated on public roads outside the lease area. The report fails to mention that these roads are in fact zoned R2 low density residential. Use as a golf course in an R2 low density residential zone is actually prohibited development according to Cogra LEP 2012. Our own independent legal advisor has also confirmed this to us. In conclusion, I support the recommendation for refusal. However, I would request the panel consider adding further reasons for refusal. 1, the part of the golf course where the fence is on public roads and zoned R2 low density residential is prohibited development. And 2, the applicant has failed to provide design guidelines that are indicative to the National Trust criteria for the Beverley Park precincts as required by the 2006 Plan of Management.
I have Renee Tepler-Kanik, please. Sorry, Renee, if I've...
Right. My name is Renee Tepler-Kanik.
Thank you.
8 Jubilee Avenue, Beverley Park. Chairman and panel members, I would really like to ask the question, why are we even here today when at the time of lodgement, the applicant had only received owner's consent from 1 of 3 landowners? Today, the applicant still does not have all owners' consent. As a result, Council should never have accepted this application for lodgement. But here we are, 21 months later, and it is evident upon reading the report that the documentation supporting the DA is so deficient that there is no alternative but to give a determination of refusal as recommended by the independent assessor. At no point has the applicant tried to engage with the local community. In fact, when residents attempted early on to discuss the proposal, they were rebuffed and treated with disdain and arrogance by the president of the club. The community are not anti-golf or anti-golf club. On the contrary, Mr Chairman, the residents of Beverley Park who are here today love the Beverley Park Golf Course. We are proud to have it as the jewel in the crown of our close-knit community. We love meeting for social occasions at the golf club. Until 18 months ago, we lived in harmony with the golfers and the golf club. This harmony has been completely shattered by the attitude of the current board and the actions of some of the directors of the club, which included covering their head to conceal their identity and putting an offensive letter in a resident's letterbox, which was captured on CCTV. Lastly, Mr Chairman, I would like to talk about the role of the steering committee of the Beverley Park Golf Course, which is made up of the Mayor, 3 ward councillors, council staff and directors of the club. According to the lease, the primary role of the steering committee is to formulate capital improvement and maintenance programs on the golf course and consider proposals or issues relating to the course with a view to the outcomes that provide balanced benefit to the community, club and council. Prior to October 2017, when this DA was lodged, the steering committee had never even considered or put forward any recommendations for a perimeter fence for the golf course. It is quite clear that this development application provides no benefit to the community, so it fails to meet the objectives of the steering committee. In conclusion, the council, i.e. the elected representatives, have indicated that they do not support the fence when they recently unanimously rejected the granting of a lease over the 6,137 square metres of road reserve where part of the fence is proposed. This golf course has stood proudly for 75 years without the need for a security fence. So I call upon you to support the recommendation for refusal of this development application as recommended by the independent assessor.
I have Gregory Welsh, please. Welsh, if you could again tell us your name and address and then your concerns, please.
Name is Gregory Welsh from 81 Harslet Crescent, Beverley Park.
Thank you.
Thanks for hearing us today, Chair and panel. I just want to talk about the dollars because there's been a lot of conversation about the reason and need for this fence. And at last council meeting, we heard from various club directors and staff about the considerable cost that the club would have had to expend in order to relocate plumbing, irrigation and other resources of the club. That was a completely spurious argument because I don't believe at any stage have any of the residents actually asked for any of the land to be resumed and not made available to the club. So the club purporting they had costs involved in doing all this was just an erroneous statement designed to throw some doubt among the whole need to do this. There's been no request by the residents to resume any of the club land that I'm aware of. There's been no conversation with the residents for any objection for what the actual club does. And we've heard from various people today about the fact that the residents actually love the club. The last thing I want to point out is under any rational business decision, this just simply doesn't stack up. To spend $400,000 to stop $20,000 to $30,000 worth of purported damage each year gives an ROI of something north of 20 years, even when you don't consider interest. No rational business would make any business decision to do a project with a 20-year ROI, and this whole thing just doesn't stack up. Thank you.
Patrick Nash, please.
Nash, 16 Ercildown Avenue, Beverley Park.
Thank you.
There's only really one issue that I'd like to mention. I'll be brief because it was touched on by one of the earlier speakers. We'll take the panel to the Roads Act discussion in the report, paragraphs 86, 87 and 88. It mentions that during the assessment it was revealed that there's parts of the golf course that encroach into the local road reserves, and it goes on to note that the encroachment is demarcated by existing copper log fence around the perimeter of the site. This fencing is intended to be replaced by the proposed fencing. This existing fencing extends beyond the boundaries of the site, i.e. into the road reserve. One of the speakers pointed out the area beyond the boundaries of the site, with the exception of Jubilee Avenue to the north and portion of Ramsgate Road to the south, is in the R2 zone. Current permissibility argument relies on an ancillary argument where the fence is ancillary to a recreation facility outdoor. In the R2 zone, recreation facilities outdoor are prohibited. Roads are permissible. I wouldn't imagine it would be classified as being ancillary to a road. So the assessment in the report only contemplates a development in the RE1 zone. Is it approved in any way, shape or form? I think that's a question mark over the validity of the consent. Now this could be a moot point if the Roads Act, section 138 of the Roads Act comes in over the top and permits some structure on a road, notwithstanding if there's development proposed on a portion of land that is R2, there needs to be consideration of that and of the objectives of that zone. It's per clause 2.3 of the LEP. If the panels have a mind to go with the refusal, I'd simply request them to have regard to the reasons I've identified.
Gabriel Clara, please.
My name is Gabrielle Clara and I live at 76 Batty Avenue, Beverley Park, and my family's been in that house since 1959. The first point I would like to make is the efficacy of the fence. I have two photographs here, two screenshots of schools that have gone up in flames in recent times. In 2018, the historical Parramatta primary school and also school in Corrimal, both of which have a fence around. If the vandals had got in without using the fence was of no use, and if they used the fence to get in, it was of no use as well. I would also like to concentrate on the type of trees that surround the golf course. They are casuarinas, which are regarded as a native tree. There are provisions in the Act and under local government bylaws concerning the protection of native trees. However, under section 2.1 of the Council's tree management policy, it states a development application is required to be lodged when seeking approval for works to trees classified as being part of a vulnerable, threatened or endangered ecological community or has potential to provide habitat for native flora and fauna. I'd like to point out that the glossy black cockatoos are an endangered species, Australian species, and their main source of fruit or food is the casuarina. And we do have a beautiful flock which comes in at the beginning of each, or in the first half of each year. It'd be very, very sad to see these trees taken down and a vulnerable type of fauna deprived of their food, and also nesting. I'd also like to point out that those that ask for the fence do not live in the immediate area. They would not get up in the morning and go outside and look at an ugly black fence which is facing onto their houses. A number of years ago, I had a real estate agent. A number of years ago, I had a real estate agent who visited me. I didn't ask him to come, but he came and asked and said to me, "Oh, Gabrielle, the value of your property is the outlook." I have to ask the question, what impact will a fence have on the value of properties and any possible legal implications? I would also like to point out that the club can't have it two ways. They invite the people coming from the football stadium to go in and have drinks, etc., before and after the matches. They even recently have started opening up a part of the area which I call the chipping practice area facing Jubilee and charging $10 a car park. And yet they don't want them to walk across the golf course. They can't have it both ways. My late nephew was the captain and also a committee member of a Central Coast Golf Club. When the fence issue was raised in the early 90s, David came to me and told me that his biggest mistake he ever made was actually in voting for the fence for his golf club. What happened was that the vandals not only got in through the fence, they damaged the fence and damaged the golf club. I would also like to point out that in this day of high drug use, that the use of ice does make people have higher strength, and it would be of no problem whatsoever for them to wreck a golf club's fence and get in and do further damage. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, they are all the objectors registered to speak today. I have now the applicant's representative. Your capacity.
Chairman, my name is Andrew Robinson, and I'm a planning consultant representing the applicant Bates on behalf of Beverley Park. I met with and was pleased.
Can I just ask you, everybody's going to get a fair chance to have their say. You can just be respectful about that, please, so that Mr. Robinson. Can you move it a little closer to you?
So, as I was saying, I met with and was appointed by the club on Monday this week to assist them with both of their applications following their receipt of the assessment reports. Firstly, I would like to apology on behalf of the golf club that the club directors are unable to be present at today's meeting as they are attending the funeral of a long-standing member and former director of the club. Mr. Frank Bates, the applicant and current president of the club, has written a letter of apology to the panel members and has asked me to distribute today. Mr. Chairman, if I can give you that letter. I think there's 5 copies, so I think there's a copy for... By way of background, the club is a not-for-profit organisation and a community club, and in order to minimise costs to their members, both applications were prepared by the club president, other honorary directors and the course superintendent. As they are not experts, they relied on their own knowledge and believed that they'd provided sufficient information to address the requirements of council. However, once they received and read through the assessment reports last week, they realised that there were a number of outstanding issues. As I mentioned, I met with the club on Monday and was briefed on both this application and the application that's next on the agenda. And in relation to this application for the perimeter fence, while it's not the sole issue of concern as set out in the report, it's disappointing that the club was only made aware of the encroachments of the existing Cobbers log fencing into the road reserves until some 10 months following lodgement of the application. However, I have advised the club that since this issue cannot be readily resolved, and irrespective of the other issues of concern, it means that in its current form this application could not be supported and consent granted. As such, the club has accepted the recommendation for refusal on that basis.
That's all you want to say in respect to that application at the moment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask, do you want me to stay here, or do you want me to...
I do want you to stay in relation to the other application, because I'll hear from the first, as we do in the normal course, but if that's all you want to say on that application, thank you. Thank you. You can take a seat then, please, Mr. Robinson. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the speakers I have in relation to the fence application for the golf course. I'm now going to move to the second application on the agenda, which is the application for the demolition work and construction of the new maintenance building and staff amenities building, on-grade car parking, bin storage area, tree removal and landscaping works on 87A Jubilee Avenue, Beverley Park. In that matter, I have four people who wish to speak as objectors to the application: Mr. Harris, Mr. Hoffmans, Mr. Peteres and Mr. Kypriotis. Kypriotis and Mr. O'Donnell together. So could I have Mr. Harris first, please? Harrison, microphone for me. Name, address and concerns, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and panel members. My name is George Harris. I'm speaking on behalf of my uncle William Harris. His address is 8 Weenie Street, Beverley Park, and is directly adjacent to the proposed development. His concerns are that the proposed structure will be so close to the property that, one, because the workmen start very early each morning, approximately 4:30 a.m, the noise will be so much closer, particularly with heavy trucks driving to the garbage and skip bins. The concrete driveway is just metres away from his boundary. He is also greatly concerned at an earlier commencement of work, which is, I think, being proposed for 3:30 a.m. Number two, the area in question is flood prone. At present, water after heavy rain sweeps away in a few hours. When the car park area is sealed with bitumen and concrete, water will pool and flood over onto the property, resulting in damage to the house and garden. Number three, the windows of the house all face onto the golf course, and due to the closeness of the new building and driveway, privacy and noise will be a problem. The bedrooms are directly above this area. And finally, the pleasant green outlook, which we all enjoy at the moment, will be lost forever, as we'll be looking into a bitumen car park. Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The independent assessment report provides a lengthy list of reasons why it is appropriate for this panel to refuse the DA. The proposed building is a massive sized building compared to the current one, which shows a clear intention to expand the existing operations in this location. We believe this will cause the character of our residential area to be totally different to that which my family has enjoyed for many years. This DA wants to change the land bordering our property from uninhibited parkland to a huge building and hard surface parking area and a driveway running directly along the length of my back fence for use by various vehicles and for trucks to load and unload hazardous materials. This is unacceptable. It will bring noise, toxic fumes and dust, possibly hazardous, and it will forever remove and destroy the beautiful environment and feeling of the area. The assessment report clarifies on page 95 in its statement of reasons for refusal that the proposal is inconsistent with the third objective of the RE1 public recreation zoning. That objective being, and I quote, to protect and enhance the natural environment for recreational purposes. All this, plus the fact that the statement of environmental effects makes many false and misleading statements. For example, on page 2, where it states that the end result will not be visually obtrusive to the eastern adjoining properties fronting Burgess Street. This is quite simply incorrect. There are 3 land uses to consider: residential, commercial and public recreational, the commercial being in conflict with the other 2. The DA involves operations from as early as 3:30 a.m, which is inappropriate when bordering on residential homes. Further, the storage of chemicals and fuels, waste and other materials should not be so close to residential homes. The proposal in the amended DA to move the building back a few metres makes no difference and in fact now introduces the driveway I just mentioned. The first floor of my home is bedrooms. Our living space, where my wife, children and I spend most of our waking hours, is the ground floor and backyard area, both of which are the most impacted by this proposed massive commercial building. It will eliminate the outlook we have and destroy the quality environment that was the reason I bought the property 25 years ago. Beverley Park Golf Club proclaims to be your community club, boasting this on the club building, yet this DA has not correctly assessed the negative impacts on my family home. Given the club states that it exists for the community, it should find a different location that the community will support. It is now almost 2 years since this DA was submitted. There has been ample time for the applicant to respond satisfactorily to the requirements, including the analysis of impacts of adjoining residences, yet it has failed to do so. I thank the independent assessor for their report and recommendation of refusal, and I request that the panel also endorse the report and refuse this DA.
Hoffman's, Mr. Pieters, I don't know how I'm going with pronunciation. Peters, thank you. You can just, full name and address and your concerns, please.
My name is Kevin Peters from 20 Batty Avenue, Beverley Park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and panel, for your time today. I'm here to present an objection to the proposed shed on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Panagiotellis, who live on the corner of Batty Avenue and Weenie Street, Beverley Park, directly adjacent to the proposed maintenance shed at Beverley Park Golf Course. Mr. and Mrs. Panagiotellis have been strongly opposed to the proposed shed since the outset, but are overseas at present and are unable to make this representation themselves. They are disappointed that they cannot be here and have requested that I make this representation on their behalf. So I shall read their objection. We have resided at our current property, number 80 Batty Avenue, for over 50 years and have made many complaints over a long period of time to the club and council with regards to the early hours greenkeeping staff commence work at the maintenance shed using noisy machinery. The noise starts from as early as 4:30 a.m. including weekends, which contravenes the plan of management and the lease, which states respectively that commencement should be 7 a.m. or sunrise. At present, a lot of heavy machinery is housed in the middle of the course, and if the club were permitted to concentrate all the equipment in the location of the proposed shed, the noise would have a catastrophic impact on the quality of life of our neighbours. Our second concern is the storage of and use of chemicals and pesticides proposed to be housed in the shed. After reading the independent planner's assessment, we are astounded at the tardiness of the club's preparation of documentation on the environmental issues surrounding this application. It makes us wonder, is this indicative of how they store and use chemicals and pesticides on the course now? Beverley Park Golf Course Master Plan states that the use of pesticides should be phased out where possible. Following statement, and I quote, Holgra Urban Conservation Area Precinct is important because it possesses streetscape integrity as it was developed during one period. The area has a uniformity of housing style, including colour, form and architectural detail that gives the area a harmonious appearance. These are not our words, but the words of the National Trust of Australia in 1998, when they recognised Beverley Park as an urban conservation. The National Trust included the precinct in the National Trust Register of 25th November 1998. The National Trust has advised residents that it is still in this register. This is why the 2006 Plan of Management required the club to develop architectural design guidelines for future development in accordance with the National Trust criteria. The club has failed the community in this important. Our last concern with this proposal is the sheer size of the building. The bulk and scale of the structure is completely out of character with the surrounding residential dwellings and is more in keeping with buildings in an industrial precinct. It is supposed to be 4 times larger than the precinct. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and panel, we would urge the planning panel not to delay a decision on this application that has been with us for over 21 months and adopt the recommendations for refusal. Thank you on behalf of Renee and Nick Panagiotelis.
I have Michael Kypriotis and Greg O'Donnell listed together. I'm not sure both or one of you wants to speak. Well, thank you. We'll come forward. Thank you. O'Donnell? Greg. Thank you. If you get the microphone, just tell us.
My name's Greg O'Donnell. I'm representing Michael and Maria. Essentially, it's actually good to see this much objection to this. The main concerns on behalf of Michael and Maria is the application has produced no acoustic impact report whatsoever, yet the acoustics impacting on their residential quite large. The size and bulk of the building in its proposed location, the commercial nature of the operations, the chemical and fuel storage potential and associated hazards with them. The setbacks used in the application are based on residential zoning setbacks, not for a depot warehouse of this nature. Various other details with the tree and waste. The applicant has not provided any acoustic report whatsoever for it. There's no way to properly assess the impact. The building structures will have a significant impact and our property in visual terms, bulk, its lack of architectural detail, there's no articulation whatsoever to soften the impact of the development environment it's in its location. It's an obtrusive bulk building in that location, dividing a recreation and residential area. The loss of views, the loss of the primary private open spaces of our property is unacceptable. Building. The proposal, by its commercial nature, presents an increased risk to health and safety. This is by way of chemical and fuel storage, by the operations, the anxiousness that this type of development next to residents creates. Fuel storage and chemical storage of this nature should, in our view, never be permitted in such close proximity when with residential housing, particularly when there's so many other locations. So principally, the main concerns and objections that we have, we believe, are worthy and valid and significant and have not been considered by the applicant. We strongly endorse the consultant's assessment that the board that concludes that this development should be refused. And we
that comprises all of the objectors registered to speak against the application. I have Mr. Robinson again as the applicant. If you come forward, please, Mr. Robinson. Robinson, I take it you're in the same capacity representing the applicant.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, yes. I was engaged on Monday to represent the club. Thank you. I apologise that the club members aren't able to attend. As I mentioned previously, this application was also prepared by the club directors and course superintendent. And that was principally done, I think, on the basis that they're trying to save money. I the new maintenance and staff amenities building, I'm told, is intended to replace the existing outdated 60-year-old building that's currently on the same site. However, I have read the staff report and I submitted with the application. And while it appears that some of the information that they believe they submitted to council may not have provided to the independent consultant, I have advised the club that their application is deficient in a number of areas, including a number of statutory requirements, and that council has not been provided with the necessary documentation to enable determination of the application other than by way of refusal, as it's recommended in the report. I have also advised the club that in particular they would need to engage consultants to prepare a number of specialist reports, including but not necessarily limited to a preliminary soil investigation, an acid sulphate soils management plan, an acoustic report, and a more detailed waste management and minimisation plan. Accordingly, the club has asked me to request that rather than determine this application today, the panel consider deferring its decision for a period of 90 days to allow the club to obtain the required reports and provide additional... Excuse me?
Ladies and gentlemen, I asked before to be respectful of all of the speakers, including Mr Robinson.
To obtain the required reports and provide additional information with the aim of resolving those outstanding issues. And in his absence, in addition to the letter of apology, Mr Bates has provided a further letter that he'd asked me to provide to the panel members that sets out his request for deferral of the application.
Reasons why he says there should be a deferment.
Said I've indicated to them that they have sufficient information to address a number of the statutory requirements. To be procured assistance
and as the club through its board indicated.
Yes, they have.
Right, okay. I'm prepared to consider some form of...
I haven't discussed that with them, but I'm happy to take that.
Is there anything else you wanted to say, Mr Robinson?
No, Mr Chairman, that was all.
Right. Is there anything that any panel member wish to ask Mr Robinson before? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to come forward. I'm not going to speak any louder. If you want to hear, you come forward. Was there any questions that any panel member had?
No questions.
Right. Thank you. Well, Mr Robinson, we will, as we indicated earlier, we will consider both of the matters on the agenda tonight, noting all the submissions that have been made. Our decision in relation to both of those matters will be made available on the council's website tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning. I think it goes on the website, so you can have a look there to see what that decision is. So there'll be nothing further said in respect of these applications tonight. If you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're certainly free to do so, but I'm going to adjourn for 2 minutes now to allow those people who wish to leave, and I'll move on to the other applications after that. Thank you.
This guy, Victor Maloof, was one of the submissions. He worked for you many, many years ago. No. There was a Maloof in favour. Yeah. Two. So it might not have been Victor.
Yeah.
This is 17. All-time single. I don't think she was.
Councillor, about that. This process has already been through in terms of making comments. So, if speak to the council planning staff about that. Yeah. We're a panel that's independent of them. So.
Last time I saw you was just going to start.
Well, I go to breakfast, it's all right. Oh, really? I grew this, but we went to this. I grew the beers out of respect for the monastery. Also don't shave it off. Was there some reason they couldn't hear down the back?
Although my paternal grandmother,
There are speakers now.
but that's a very, it's like Smith.
Is it a volume thing? Maybe the number of people in here doesn't project as well.
I know it's raised.
Ready to go with the next one? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with the meeting. The third matter on the agenda is the application for alterations and additions to an existing dwelling, construction of a new detached secondary dwelling. Sorry, that's the fourth item. Let's start with the third item. It's the application for 2 Dardanelle Street, Mortdale, demolition of the existing structures, tree removal and construction of a new 2-storey detached dual occupancy development, including front fence, provision of services and landscaping works. I have no objectors registered to speak in relation to this application, but I have Mr. Mortada on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Mortada, would you like to come forward?
If there's no one else complaining, objecting,
Got any questions to the application?
Yeah, unless you've got any questions.
Questions.
Yep.
So, ask. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Mortada, you accept that this proposed development is...
I'll just stop for a moment. Are we able to close that door? Noise, please, Kathy. Sorry, Mr. Mortada, I just want to...
All right.
So we can hear. Sorry.
Mr. Mortada, you understand opposite in Grove Street. Do you agree with me that one of the properties that you cited in support of your application that environmental effects is Street, which is Dardanelles?
Yeah.
And that development is very similar to what you're proposing. And again, I'm not being critical.
Yeah. Your
statement of environmental effects is almost identical. What do you say to the residents who are concerned about the dramatic contemporary nature of what you propose at 2 Dardanelles compared to the predominantly Californian bungalow and interwar architectural style that's prevalent?
Sorry, there's a couple of things to say here. One, I think the contrast between contemporary and I'm not trying to replicate anything across the road or, take anything away from it. In fact, if you talk about, that particular dwelling, especially dwelling Grove Avenue, Further up the road, you've got about, I think, 20, 30 properties which just have garages, you know, that are square boxes and that adjacent to the Heritage Conservation. Got maybe 3 houses in the whole side of Algrove Avenue, our side, that now I haven't tried to replicate any form or anything. There's a very large separation between my proposal and the road. The other thing is the actual site, the layout of the site within my site. I see a lot of dual occupancies on corners, you know, that are attached, wide and so forth. I think I've done a very good job at, you know, articulating the house at the rear and the house at the front, and provided a very large separation between dwellings. And that plays a very big role as well in terms of context, site layout within my site. Right. Materials as well, so, you know, using materials that, you know, don't necessarily replicate across the road, I think that type of contrast as well contributes to.
So your take on where the clause in the LEP talks about how it would affect the heritage significance of the and I accept you're not being asked to mimic. That in itself means that it's not.
And also, like, one thing I want to bring to your attention as well, like one side's Mortdale, the other side's Penshurst. So being as well a different suburb, my course a little bit.
You mean Grove Street is?
So Grove Street, so so one side's Mortdale, one side's Penshurst. So, you know, there is a border there, and the border was created, you know, at that line. So
Grove Street is the border.
So Grove Street's the border. The further border, yeah. Border of the Heritage Conservation.
That, I can understand that from a geographic point of view, but from an aesthetic point of view, someone driving up or down that street would see a contemporary building that you propose.
Yeah.
Yes, the prevalent.
So, you know, I think the contrast between the two is fine. I don't see an issue with that.
Appreciate this is not in the conservation area, but you would not be able to get approval. Well, I put to you, you wouldn't be able to get approval for what you proposed if it was in the conservation area.
Correct. However, I do want to say one thing to it. So if I were to be designing a 2-story house, council, you know, I do acknowledge it's a detached lot, but the bulk and scale of the dwelling at the rear is very well articulated. So not one plain facade, one plain wall, it's actually staggered. So you've got a lot of, you know, use. So there's a lot of other stuff that contribute.
Just, a little bit of understanding or interest. Go through an exercise or
The tree protection zone for the tree is actually 14 meters. Very large diameter. So if we were to sort of, you know, work around that, it's very hard to actually work with that tree. So, and also any future impact of the tree. I think the officer here has because the footprint would be very small, very small. Also, you know, the requirement for parking as well doesn't help.
Street could be retained though, and you vary some of the defects. That might be possible.
It's very hard because of the minimums. So at 325, you take away the front setback and you've got the side setbacks. Can't play around much with it. With that sort of footprint, it becomes.
I had the same question.
So the second setback.
Which is dwelling, we're talking about
Yeah.
dwelling two, which is setback 3.5 metres. Why should we allow that? in
Okay,
this
so
case?
that's not actually a solid wall. That's the actual.
Got 3.5 to,
I got 3.7.
Okay.
Study.
yeah,
Okay, so
740 to the study.
Okay, so this was discussed with the planner before. So previously, this design here, I had the setback on the ground floor to 900 to the side. But in order to allow separation between this property and that property, it was agreed that if little section encroaches onto the 4.5, it will give a better site layout to our building and this private open space here. Because you've got north here, all the shadows doing that. So bringing it this way and just having the study within the 3.5 meters was
Trying to respond to, or?
It's mainly articulating the facade, the very wide facade facing.
Tree protection or two. Arborist that was engaged. Understand an arborist will go to the Australian standard and say, this is the Australian standard, but on that and say, well, we can save this or we could keep it if.
Look, I believe, I'm not sure if they did or they didn't, but they tend to sort of stick to the Australian standards, and a lot of
that's
people.
the conservative way of saying,
yeah,
the Australian standard can.
Yeah, so you know it's kind of contradicting because you know we've got other policies and codes that say. Very difficult to retain.
When character this area, even putting.
I think it's more style, and you know, last I've done quite a bit of these. And the trend tends to be, you know, people want a bit. I think it helps you at times.
You don't have a height problem here, you're well under.
Yeah.
Wanted to, but.
Yeah, you know, on any design you can, but in this particular one, we're trying. After mainly from 12 to 3.
Yeah.
And also, it's important to say this is what, yeah, this is why the separation. Yeah, and also,
And there's an amenity by adopting the flat roof as compared to.
also when you go out from the house at number 4, when you walk outside the backyard, you don't want to.
As I indicated, we'll make a decision later tonight, and it'll be available on the website tomorrow. Thank you. Completion of the third matter. The fourth matter, we have no speakers registered. That concludes our meeting tonight. We'll adjourn to deliberate and publish our decisions. Decisions will be published on the website tomorrow morning.